March 17, 1943. In his Berlin office, Admiral Wilhelm Canaris felt a jolt as a thick folder thudded onto his mahogany desk, sending a ripple through his coffee and leaving brown stains across sensitive intelligence papers. Documents that, if discovered by the Gestapo, could have meant instant execution. Canaris' mind raced. The report in his hands was almost unbelievable. For years, German military intelligence had assumed that American wartime production was limited by inefficiency and racial theories embedded in Nazi ideology. Yet the contents of this folder suggested otherwise. Intercepted messages and first-hand accounts from operatives still active in Mexico City indicated that the Willow Run factory, operated by the Ford Motor Company, was producing one B-24 Liberator bomber every hour. This aircraft, a massive machine of nearly 1.5 million parts, 450,000 rivets, and 30,000 separate assemblies, rolled off the line with a speed that Germany could not match even for its simplest military vehicles. Major Friedrich Wilhelm Heinz, standing rigidly beside him, had verified the data 3 separate times. Each verification returned the same staggering numbers. Canaris felt the weight of a reality that defied not only Nazi propaganda, but the very calculations that had guided Germany's strategic planning. From the windows of the Abwehr headquarters, Canaris could see the Landwehr Canal, a silent reminder of history where Rosa Luxemburg's body had been discarded more than 2 decades earlier. Now, as head of German military intelligence, he faced a failure of comprehension that would grow into one of the most catastrophic misjudgments in modern military history. The systematic inability of the Nazi regime to recognize, understand, or act upon the true scale of American industrial output, a failure that would accelerate the Third Reich's downfall. This miscalculation had roots stretching back 2 years. In 1941, Luftwaffe General Karl Kohler had presented evidence to Hermann Göring from their military attaché in Washington, Friedrich von Fischer, showing that American aircraft production was approaching 2,000 planes per month. Göring dismissed the figures outright, mocking the notion that Americans could manufacture military aircraft at that scale. "They only know refrigerators and razors," he scoffed. At a meeting with Hitler at the Wolfschanz in December 1941, just days after Pearl Harbor, Göring reiterated his disbelief. Democracy, in his view, made the Americans inherently weak. Their ethnically diverse population caused inefficiency, and their Jewish citizens supposedly corrupted their society. There was no way they could achieve what their reports claimed. By 1943, however, German intelligence received consistent, corroborated information from multiple independent sources across the Americas that directly contradicted every Nazi assumption about industrial capacity. Reports came from Mexican industrialists who maintained ties to Germany, Spanish diplomats stationed in the United States, Swedish businessmen visiting Detroit, and even personal correspondence intercepted between American factory workers and relatives in neutral countries. Every channel told the same impossible story. Willow Run alone was producing more heavy bombers than the entire German aircraft industry combined. Oberst Nicholas Ritter, responsible for air intelligence within the Abwehr, had spent 3 weeks scrutinizing these reports. Ritter, a former Luftwaffe pilot who had lived in the United States for a decade before the war, had an unusually clear understanding of American industrial potential. In the 1920s, his Manhattan apartment had afforded him a front-row view of the Chrysler Building's construction, allowing him to witness firsthand the speed and efficiency with which Americans could complete monumental projects. That experience, decades old, now provided a crucial context for evaluating the extraordinary claims about wartime production. Germany's intelligence apparatus had finally encountered something it could neither rationalize nor communicate effectively: a scale of industrial output that outstripped every expectation and assumption, undermining Nazi projections of victory. The data in Canaris's hands represented not just a strategic surprise, but the beginning of a deeper, systemic misjudgment, one that would seal the fate of the Third Reich long before the first American bomb ever fell on Berlin. Admiral Ritter's reports were submitted directly to Canaris. Based on the intelligence gathered, it became evident that Germany's position was already untenable. At that point, the outcome of the war appeared to be a matter of calculations and timing, rather than strategy or bravery. The flow of information reached German command through a series of high-risk channels, each posing significant dangers to the operatives involved. One key source, Georg Nicholas, was in charge of Germany's principal intelligence network in Mexico City. Nicholas had successfully embedded contacts among American businessmen who frequently traveled between Detroit and the oil fields of Mexico. These individuals often spoke freely about industrial developments and technological breakthroughs, completely unaware that their casual remarks were being meticulously recorded and transmitted by German agents. On February 3, 1943, Harold Morrison, an American executive in the oil sector, attended a formal event hosted by the German-Mexican Chamber of Commerce in Mexico City. Over the course of the evening, Morrison became candid under the influence of several drinks, recounting a recent visit to Ford's Willow Run facility, a tour organized to demonstrate the company's ability to fulfill government contracts to prospective investors. Morrison described the scale and sophistication of the plant in terms that left no doubt about its unprecedented industrial capacity. He spoke of assembly lines stretching for more than a mile, massive interior spaces where clouds would form and rain occasionally fell, and a workforce of some 42,000, including large numbers of African American women engaged in the production of one of the most complex machines ever conceived. Using a napkin and pencil, he began. According to Morrison, the aircraft featured 2 bomb bays, each capable of holding 4,000 pounds of ordnance, and 4 engines producing 1,200 horsepower apiece. Production was organized into modular sections, or sub-assemblies, which arrived at the main assembly line from different directions: wings from one side, fuselages from another, and tail sections from yet another, converging with precise timing. When asked about potential delays or mechanical breakdowns due to this complexity, Morrison explained that traditional aircraft manufacturers had long doubted the feasibility of such mass production. They argued that planes could not be assembled like automobiles. Yet Ford had dissected the process into roughly 60,000 discrete operations, training each worker to perform a single, repetitive task with remarkable efficiency. Workers could transition from domestic duties to assembling hydraulic systems within days rather than months. Additional intelligence reached German command via Spain under Francisco Franco. Colonel José Ungría, serving as the Spanish military attaché in Washington, maintained extensive contacts with American aviation companies while clandestinely providing sensitive information to Germany. His motivation included securing tungsten shipments essential to Spain's industrial output, illustrating how economic interests intersected with wartime intelligence operations. The convergence of these intelligence streams, through Mexico, Spain, and other critical nodes, provided Germany with an exceptionally detailed understanding of American industrial capabilities. Yet paradoxically, the very accuracy of this intelligence underscored the inevitability of Germany's defeat, as the technological and logistical advantage lay firmly in Allied hands. In March 1943, Ungría attended an event at the Argentine embassy where he encountered Charles Sorensen, Ford Motor Company's production director and the engineer behind the Willow Run bomber facility. Believing he was addressing an envoy from a neutral country potentially interested in acquiring aircraft after the war, Sorensen spoke openly about the plant's capabilities and processes. Unaware that his remarks would reach Berlin within a fortnight, he described the operation in detail. Reflecting on his earlier visit to the consolidated San Diego plant in 1940, Sorensen recalled seeing B-24 bombers assembled outdoors, with each aircraft slightly different from the previous one. Production required an extraordinary 180,000 man-hours per plane, and he recognized significant room for efficiency improvements. Andrea pressed Sorensen for specifics, presenting himself as a military engineer seeking technical insights. Proud of his achievements, Sorensen provided a thorough explanation. Later, Andrea spent a night in his San Diego hotel meticulously mapping the entire production process. He envisioned a system in which bombers would move along a production line past fixed workstations, allowing each employee to specialize in repetitive tasks and refine their performance through continuous practice, rather than swarming over stationary aircraft. When questioned about labor challenges, Sorensen explained that the plant had established an apprenticeship program capable of training 8,000 workers weekly. Women constituted approximately 40% of the workforce, excelling at detailed, repetitive tasks due to their smaller hands and patience. African American workers operated complex machinery, while 16-year-old boys managed supply logistics. In Sorensen's view, true efficiency in a democracy required the optimal use of all available human talent. German intelligence monitored Willow Run through multiple international channels, including Sweden, Argentina, Japan, and Turkey, receiving reports that corroborated the factory's high output. Swedish engineer Erik Lundberg visited the plant in March 1943 and observed, quote, "The production methods are highly advanced, defying conventional European expectations. The facility employs 1,600 specialized machines, many built for a single operation. The capital investment in equipment alone may reach $200 million. Additional confirmation came through intercepted Japanese communications. Commander Toshikazu Omi's coded messages to Tokyo were analyzed by German intelligence, independently validating the production capacity. This single factory produced more aircraft per month than the entire Japanese aviation industry at the time. By April 1943, German intelligence had aggregated detailed data from 17 separate sources, providing a reliable picture of American bomber output. Willow Run alone achieved peak production of 650 B-24s monthly, while the total US B-24 output exceeded 1,400 units per month. Concerned about these figures, the German command authorized Operation Pistorius, a covert mission to infiltrate sabotage agents into the United States via submarine. George John Dash, the leader of one of the two four-person teams, had previously lived in the U.S. for 2 decades before returning to Germany in 1939. His instructions from Admiral Canaris emphasized gathering intelligence on American aircraft manufacturing before attempting any sabotage. Dash's team arrived on Long Island at Amagansett in the early hours of June 13, 1942, having come ashore from a U-boat shortly after midnight. Within days, confronted by the magnitude of the U.S. industrial capacity and the implications of his mission, Dash chose to surrender to the FBI. During his debriefing, he provided information that left American authorities profoundly surprised, revealing the extensive scale and sophistication of U.S. bomber production. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris reported directly that Berlin was deeply skeptical of American production claims. German officials considered the figures from the Willow Run plant exaggerated, dismissing them as deliberate propaganda. Canaris sought to provide irrefutable proof, photographs, employee rosters, shipping manifests, and other documentation that could compel Hermann Göring to confront the truth. FBI agent Charles Landman expressed disbelief. The idea of producing 1 bomber per hour seemed impossible to him. Canaris, having witnessed American industrial capacity firsthand, explained that if Ford could manufacture a car every minute prior to the war, then assembling a B-24 Liberator every 60 minutes was achievable. His warnings, however, were frequently interpreted as defeatist by German authorities. On April 20, 1943, Hitler's 54th birthday, Canaris personally presented his intelligence to Göring at Karen Hall, the Reichsmarschall's lavish hunting estate north of Berlin. This session would later become infamous within German intelligence circles for Göring's complete denial of reality. Canaris laid out extensive documentation, including intercepted communications, photographs, and intelligence from multiple independent sources, carefully arranging them across Göring's massive oak desk. Reichsmarschall, Canaris began cautiously, we have confirmation from 17 separate sources that the Willow Run facility is producing one B-24 bomber per hour during peak operations. This level of output has been sustained since January. Göring, whose weight had surpassed 280 pounds by this stage of the war, examined one photograph showing the assembly line stretching into the distance. "Do you expect me to believe this?" he demanded scornfully. "These are obviously mock-ups, staged for propaganda. The Americans want us to think they can assemble aircraft like sausages. In reality, this plant might produce 50 bombers in a month at most." Canaris countered with further evidence, including a Pennsylvania Railroad manifest detailing monthly aluminum shipments totaling 16 million pounds, more than the entire German monthly production. Göring dismissed the data derisively. "And you think they acquire all that aluminum through Negro laborers or women on the assembly line? You've been fooled by American propaganda."
A week later, Canaris was summoned to brief Hitler at the Wolf's Lair. The meeting included high-ranking generals such as von Kluge and von Jodl, as well as propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels. Hitler, studying maps of the Eastern Front ahead of the planned Operation Citadel, listened impatiently while Canaris laid out the intelligence. "Mein Führer," Canaris stated, aware of the personal danger in speaking plainly, "if the Americans are producing 1,400 B-24s per month in addition to their B-17s, fighters, and British aircraft, the Reich will soon face aerial bombardment beyond its defensive capacity." Hitler's reply was dismissive. "Admiral, Americans are capable of mass-producing simple items like cars or refrigerators, but a bomber is not a consumer good. It requires technical skill, precision, and commitment. It took us 6 years to prepare for war. They claim to have reached this level in just 16 months. It is impossible." Even General von Jodl, examining the numbers, struggled to reconcile the figures. Hitler interrupted. "Even if we accept a quarter of these figures, they are still implausible. The Americans entered the war only in December 1941. Building such a facility and achieving these outputs in this time frame defies belief." Unknown to the German leadership, Canaris had obtained clandestine film of Willow Run operations via American intelligence contacts in Switzerland. Smuggled through Spanish diplomatic channels, the footage depicted a full mile of assembly line activity with B-24s in various stages of construction moving steadily. Men and women of different backgrounds worked in coordinated precision, and clocks, visible on the line, verified the timing. Canaris and his deputy, Hans Oster, reviewed the film in a secure Abwehr office. Realizing the truth, they destroyed the footage to prevent accusations of either propaganda or betrayal, aware that presenting it would likely be dismissed. By November 1943, German intelligence had acquired aerial reconnaissance photographs of Willow Run through a Spanish diplomat. Analysts spent weeks scrutinizing the images. They found evidence of 3-shift operations, including parking lots with approximately 12,000 vehicles, completed B-24s staged for delivery, and a clearly visible assembly line through skylights. Freight cars delivering raw materials were precisely aligned, confirming previously reported data. Analyst Hedmund Vennard concluded, Evidence corroborates human intelligence reports. Production estimates appear accurate. Immediate strategic reassessment is recommended. Hermann Göring, when confronted with photographs indicating the scale of American aircraft production, dismissed them outright as mere clever fabrications, likely models staged to exaggerate output. Meanwhile, Dr. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister and the only top Nazi official with a true grasp of industrial logistics, secretly obtained the American intelligence reports. His diary entry dated May 15, 1943, later discovered after the war, captured his deep alarm. If the Willow Run production figures were even partially accurate, Germany was not merely at risk of defeat, it faced total obliteration. Speer knew speaking openly would be tantamount to signing his own death warrant. Dr. Otto Ohlendorf, an economist and head of the SD Inland Office, analyzed the available American industrial data. His December 1943 report to Heinrich Himmler presented stark realities. Ford Motor Company, which had produced 1.1 million vehicles in 1941, had reoriented its factories to manufacture bombers. At the then current pace, by June 1944, the United States would be generating enough B-24 bombers to deliver the equivalent of Germany's entire 1940 London bombing tonnage every single day. On December 24, 1943, Admiral Wilhelm Canaris received intelligence projecting American aircraft production for the following year: 18,000 B-24 Liberators, 12,000 B-17 Flying Fortresses, 1,000 B-29 Super Fortresses, and 40,000 fighters, totaling 86,000 planes. Hitler's reaction was one of incredulity. He could not fathom that the Americans planned to produce more aircraft in a single year than all nations combined throughout history. By February 4, 1944, Canaris had been removed from his post under suspicion of defeatism and treason. His successor, Walter Schellenberg, was a loyalist who would not challenge Hitler or Göring. Yet reality was becoming impossible to ignore. On February 20, 1944, the American 8th Air Force initiated Operation Argument, sending over 1,000 heavy bombers against German aircraft factories. In just 6 days, the tonnage dropped surpassed the total bombs the Luftwaffe had dropped on Britain during the entire Blitz. Fighter ace Adolf Galland reported to Göring, "Herr Reichsmarschall, I counted formations of more than 800 bombers. These are not illusions. They are real planes, delivering real destruction." By June 6, 1944, over 11,000 Allied aircraft appeared over France, while the Luftwaffe could assemble fewer than 300 fighters in defense. Field Marshal Hugo Sperling sent an urgent report to Berlin. The enemy held uncontested air superiority. German intelligence had been accurate. The deception lay not with the Americans, but in Germany's own self-delusions. Willow Run reached peak production in April 1944. During that month, the plant's workforce, operating in 2 9-hour shifts 6 days a week, completed 453 B-24 Liberators in 468 working hours, an average of 1 finished bomber every 63 minutes. The facility employed 42,331 individuals, including 11,000 women, 26% of the workforce, 3,800 African Americans, approximately 9%, and 1,200 disabled workers, 3%. These figures alone completely contradicted the Nazi conception of racial hierarchy, as groups considered inferior were producing aircraft at rates vastly surpassing Germany's own master race. Post-war interviews with German intelligence officers exposed the full magnitude of the failure. Walter Schellenberg testified at the Nuremberg trials that the truth of American production was known to them by early 1943. Every competent intelligence officer recognized the numbers as reliable. Yet reporting them would have meant immediate execution for defeatism. Hans von Greifenhagen, in his memoirs, reflected, "The tragedy was not a shortage of intelligence. We were inundated with it. The real catastrophe was that our leadership refused to accept it because it directly contradicted their racial ideology." During World War II, several German intelligence officers who attempted to provide accurate assessments of Allied capabilities faced fatal consequences. Admiral Wilhelm Canaris and Hans Oster were both executed on April 9, 1945, at Flossenburg concentration camp. Alexis von Rona was put to death in October 1944 for his participation in the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler. In contrast, Hans Bern-Gavius managed to flee to Switzerland and survive the conflict. The reports from German intelligence had accurately reflected the industrial strength of the United States, a fact later confirmed by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey. At Willow Run, the Ford Motor Company factory produced a staggering total of 8,685 B-24 bombers between 1942 and 1945. Production peaked at an astonishing 650 aircraft per month, a rate that was consistently maintained for extended periods. Economies of scale and efficiency improvements reduced the cost per bomber from $238,000 to $137,000. In post-war interrogations, Albert Speer, the Nazi armaments minister, explained that the German leadership refused to believe the intelligence on American aircraft output because accepting it would have undermined their worldview. To acknowledge that a factory like Ford could turn out a fully operational bomber every hour was to admit that many of their core beliefs were mistaken, that democratic nations were not inherently weak, that racial integration did not produce inferiority, and that women were capable of performing tasks traditionally assigned to men. Recognizing these facts would have meant confronting the harsh truth that Germany had initiated a conflict it could not hope to win. But who could have delivered such news to Hitler? One of the women who contributed to this immense industrial effort was Rose Will Monroe, the real-life figure who inspired the iconic Rosie the Riveter. Before the attack on Pearl Harbor, Monroe and thousands of other women had little to no experience in factory work. During the war, she operated a rivet gun on the B-24 production line. In a 1984 interview, Monroe recalled, "We knew we were contributing to something vital. Every rivet we set brought the war closer to an end. We often worked double shifts, sometimes even sleeping in the parking lot between them. Many of us had loved ones in the air flying these planes." Germany's refusal to acknowledge the intelligence regarding Willow Run had severe repercussions. While the Allies achieved unprecedented production capacity, the German war effort continued to focus on bomber construction well into late 1944, failing to adjust strategies or prioritize resources in ways that might have altered the course of the conflict. During World War II, strategic miscalculations and the misallocation of resources played a decisive role in the outcome of the conflict. Germany invested heavily in experimental wonder weapons at the expense of practical defensive measures, while its operational plans underestimated the scale of the threat, preparing for attacks from hundreds of bombers rather than thousands. Diplomatic opportunities were also mishandled. Peace initiatives were postponed, partly because German leaders failed to comprehend the magnitude of their impending defeat. Captured documents analyzed by German economists revealed the enormous scale of American production at Willow Run. The cost of constructing and operating Willow Run reached $200 million, nearly half of the total investment made in Germany's entire aircraft industry from 1933 to 1945, equivalent to $400 million. The factory alone occupied 3.5 million square feet, compared to just 8 million square feet for all German aircraft plants combined. Its electrical consumption reached 2.5 million kilowatts per month,
more than some entire German cities. In essence, a single American factory consumed more resources than Germany could muster across multiple industrial hubs. By the end of the war, the full magnitude of American production had become apparent. Willow Run alone produced 8,685 B-24 Liberators, while the total number of B-24s across the United States reached 18,188. In comparison, 12,731 B-17 Flying Fortresses were built. Between 1940 and 1945, the United States produced 33,717 aircraft, while Germany produced 94,700. Despite fighting a war on two oceans simultaneously, America outproduced Germany by a factor of 3.2. Historians have identified Germany's failure to accurately interpret American industrial capacity as one of the most consequential intelligence errors in military history. This was not a failure of intelligence gathering. German operatives collected highly accurate data on U.S. production capabilities. The failure was one of recognition and acceptance. German leadership refused to accept intelligence that conflicted with their preconceived notions. Historian Dr. Gerhard Weinberg concluded that by early 1943, German intelligence had a precise understanding of American production capacity. If this information had been trusted and acted upon, Germany might have sought peace at least 2 years earlier, potentially sparing millions of lives.
The lessons from this episode are profound. Cognitive biases can cause accurate information to be dismissed when it contradicts deeply held beliefs. Ideology can distort rational judgment, overriding numerical realities. Institutional systems that reward comforting narratives while punishing inconvenient truths are prone to catastrophic error. Underestimating an opponent's capabilities can lead directly to strategic collapse. At the 1985 dedication of the Yankee Air Museum at Willow Run, former factory worker Rosie Willa Monroe, one of the Rosie the Riveters, met former Luftwaffe pilot Hans Rudel. Rudel asked, "How did you manage to build so many so quickly?" Monroe replied simply, "We showed up every day, did our work, and kept at it. Nothing complicated, just people doing their jobs." Rudel noted the contrast with what he had been told in Germany, that democracy was inefficient and diversity a weakness. Those beliefs, as he realized, had contributed to immense human suffering. In May 1945, American intelligence officers in Berlin uncovered the final German report on Willow Run, dated April 20, Hitler's last birthday. It confirmed the scale of American production. The German report, which could have influenced decisions 2 years earlier, never reached Hitler. By then, the Third Reich was collapsing, and thousands of U.S. bombers, many manufactured at Willow Run, were enforcing the consequences of Germany's refusal to heed reality. The German intelligence failure was not a deficit in data collection. It was a failure of judgment. Ignoring uncomfortable truths had fatal consequences. This episode underscores a timeless lesson. Reality is indifferent to ideology. Numbers and material facts do not bend to belief. Ignored truths, left unheeded, can become tragedies of immense scale. Willow Run stands as evidence not only of industrial might, but of the power of democratic organization, the strength of diversity, and the effectiveness of freedom in mobilizing people. German spies counted every bomber, yet disbelief rendered their intelligence useless, sealing the fate of the Third Reich.